Hey, welcome back, everybody. Hope you enjoyed the breakouts. I had a lot of fun in my breakout. I'm kind of bummed sitting here hosting Summit because I only get to attend one at a time. So hopefully you guys get the recordings, get to go back and watch them. We learned a lot in the YouTube video marketing session with Josh Culler. It was really good. But anyways, we're talking about novations now. This is a hot topic right now, highly misunderstood and highly valuable when you do it right. So I wanted to introduce our new friend, Joe. I'm going to try your last name, Cipollini. Welcome to the Summit, man.
Yeah,
Did I get it right?
you nailed it, man. You nailed it.
Good. Well, welcome to the Summit, man. Tell us who you are, what you do, and give us a little bit of background.
Yeah, awesome. I appreciate the invite, and love being in the same space as Josh. What a good dude. So, um, that's cool. So my name is Joe Cipollini, as Brady kindly introed me and nailed it. I am the chief sales officer here, and I work in two different spaces. So I'll clarify that just so you get a little understanding of where I'm coming from. I work in the investment space inside of our investment business alongside Eric Brewer, who is the CEO of our company, which is Integrity First Home Buyers. And in that organization, I'm the Chief Learning and Development Officer. I also work in our outward facing education spaces, both working with Novations at the Brewer Method and our sales side of things as well. We actually launched sales as a byproduct of learning how broken so many of the businesses were that we were working with in the novation space. The problem wasn't that they needed to add novations; it was that they needed to get better at sales. So that's a summary of who I am, where I come from. I've been in the real estate space for over 16 years. My very first job in real estate was getting Eric coffee. And I was like 22 years old and didn't know anything from anything. So here we are.
That's awesome, man. It pays really well to stick with people that know what they're doing and stay focused. So tell us, sell me on novations, man. Why are novations something people need to have in their toolbox, especially in this market that we're in right now?
What an awesome question. So novations, that's a big question too, because it actually takes me, like the first thing that happened as you're asking that question was like, it takes me back to 2008, 9, and 10, which is like, how did we even discover using novations?
Hmm.
Um, and novations for our investment side of things, right? Our flipping company, we do like 400-ish deals a year. So we have pretty decent exposure. And it came in that time period as the market was shifting, right? 2008, 9, and 10, like, massive shift, right?
Yeah.
And in that period, as the brakes were screeching on the market and the flipping regulations were coming in place, where you had seasoning with FHA and now you needed to wait 90 days and all of this other stuff, we're like, well, how are we going to keep the wheels on this bus? And we introduced novations because fundamentally what they allow you to do is pass the transaction through you, and the deed goes directly from the original seller to the new buyer and not pass through you like an assignment or a double close. So it was actually our response to a shifting market, was to figure out novations and then use them really well. And
Hmm.
right now what we're seeing is that as the market's changing, it's a different reason and the same outcome, right? So the reason now is that the market in a lot of places is appreciating still, right? I mean, we're sort of seeing the momentum of that softening a little bit, but even still, I don't think there's any argument that you get more money on the open market than you do on your wholesale distro list.
Hmm.
And taking properties to the open market at a time when transactions are tougher to come by and making more money on them, that's what novations are really good for. So right now we're seeing across our business and across our multiple markets, we're averaging in the 70 to 75% of our dispositions are happening by way of novations.
Really interesting.
Uh,
70 to 75%. Okay.
And that's
Okay.
an increase for us, even for us. So that's more than it was last year. And we didn't change anything. It's just simply that we're getting better offers and better deals there. So we take the better offer, better deal, happens to just be novations right now.
Okay, that makes sense. Break it down for me in technical and simple terms, or I also could ask, like, what are some of the other exit strategies people compare novations to? What are some of the other
Mhm.
terms you've heard them called for people that might not know?
Um, so like I've heard, I live in a bubble, man. So I'm not 100% sure what everybody, all the YouTube folks call it or whatever.
Yeah.
It's an alternative to an assignment, right? So it's a replacement deal. I have heard people kind of refer to it as a partnering with the seller. I'm not sure if there's like a technical term for that that they're using, but essentially what you're doing there is instead of an assignment, right? So assignment is sort of traditional wholesale. It's you take an A to B contract where you're the B buyer, you lock it up with the A seller, and then you assign that to a new person. So the whole deal gets packaged together and sent off to the C buyer. And in innovation, you have that A to B still happens, but instead of you packaging it and sending it, you pull yourself out, you replace yourself with the C buyer, and the deed goes A to C, right? So a novation comes from the word nova, which means new, and so it's literally because it's a new contract. You create a replacement deal. So
Mm.
I'm not sure I totally answered that, but that's
Yeah.
like if anybody's there, and thinking what exactly are we talking about here? And it's sort of this like mythical creature where people like have heard of novation, but they've heard different variations of it. Should I partner with the seller? Do I right? Should I do a novation and renovate the property in the meantime? There's a lot of questions out there, almost more questions than answers. So hopefully that gave you a little bit of something to
Yeah.
work with.
That does. That really does help, man. I think one of the first things I want to tackle is like when and why. Could you walk me through maybe a recent transaction or a recent deal where it's like you were looking at other options, you were looking at maybe wholesaling it or listing it, and what led you to choose innovation?
hmm So, for clarity, right? We do, like I said, we do 400 deals a year, and we do assignments, right? Wholesale, traditional, and wholesale to us is actually more of a transaction type than a transaction structure. I don't care if
Mhm.
it's assignment innovation. Wholesale to me means it's going to another investor. There has to
Yeah.
be meat on the bone left, right? So we do wholesale and then we do wholetail. And for us, wholetail is taking that property down on a wholesale acquisitions, but dispoing it out to a retail buyer, meaning somebody who wants to pay more of retail pricing. We also do fix and flip. That's on the table here. And occasionally we'll hold stuff, right? So all of the exits are on the table for us. At the end of the day, right? And so I'll give you what you asked for, which is an example, right? So we took a property down not too long ago, and this is actually a kind of a classic example. So just bear with me. Like not every example is going to be as perfect as this, but this was an inherited property, and
Okay.
what we heard from the seller was the thing that was most important to them was convenience, meaning um, they wanted to not have to do anything. They wanted to be able to walk away. So good, that's a good fit for an investor deal. They were flexible with time because they weren't up against a wall or anything like that, and not in tremendous distress. And they wanted a little bit more money than we wanted, right? And they were like, "Well, we want more money than your initial offer was for a cash price, but we don't really want to deal with the headache of the open market because inspections will come along. It's an estate. We don't really want to deal with that."
Yeah.
Novation's a perfect fit, right? Doing there is you're taking that property, and in our situation, and the way that innovation works typically for us is we're taking that to the open market, right? So we're taking a piece of inventory to the market that wasn't going to go there really. Like those people didn't really want to list, and it's in good enough shape that a buyer can buy it and has interest in it, but we're doing all of our decision making off of the current value. We call that CCRV, so current condition retail value. It's not ARV, which is after rehab value.
Hmm.
And so we don't have to worry about maximizing the pricing. All we have to worry about is what's it worth right now. And what it was worth at the moment was like I think it was, we pegged it around 170-ish.
Mhm.
And our cash price on that, probably in the 80-ish, maybe $90,000 range. And we ended up taking it down at 120, which is a little bit more, right? 120 to let's call it 160, right? Somewhere in that range. Like that's not a ton of spread. You got to pay commissions and all that. Um, but we had no exposure on it. We had no cost on it. And so we took a piece of inventory to the market that was, again, okay. All we were responsible for is the clean out and making sure that they get through inspections of the retail market. Boom, easy peasy. Property went to the market. The sellers, the original sellers, the estate, they got what they wanted. They got more money by 30 grand, right?
Mm.
We were able to capture a little bit of money, and the buyers were able to get a deal that was able to get through the inspection process, a little bit of repairs. I think we were maybe $1,200, $1,500 out of pocket on that. but the sellers, the estate didn't have any money to pay for that. The estate had no cash. It would have come out of the executor's pockets, and that wasn't
Mm,
really an option for them.
yeah.
It was a perfect scenario. It's a win-win-win, right? The
Yeah.
sellers win, we win, and the buyers win because that inventory wasn't really out there.
Yeah. Were they I'm just curious, it doesn't really matter, but were they out of state or were they local?
It was a mix there, right? We had one. Well, it was one decision maker who's local, another decision maker who's out of the area. So then you get some of those dynamics, and again, that's why I say it's kind of a perfect scenario for us because you
Yeah.
get these estate, these executors where they're multiple. You have multiple decision makers that are out there, and they don't really want to do that, and that is really easy for them. And we always look at Novations as that alternative. It's not a great fit. Our contract to close rate for our acquisitions agents is 22%. So 22% of the time we go out on an acquisitions appointment, we're going to get a deal.
Nice.
I'm not trying to get to 40. I Novations are not the silver bullet that just like doubles your deals. What it does is it lets you just squeak out that extra 1 out of 10 or 1 out of 8 that you wouldn't have been able to get otherwise with a higher offer because you couldn't have paid more. That's all it's doing. It's just giving you those extra deals. And you're doing those extra deals. Yeah, we paid 1,200 or 1,500 bucks on inspections on that particular deal I just referenced, but you're doing it with no cash out of pocket. So it's almost like the advantages of wholesale, but without the downside of only having to sell it off market to a wholesale buyer.
Gotcha.
That's the
That
trick.
makes sense.
Yeah.
So let me make sure I'm understanding this correctly. The main value proposition for the seller is, you can still sell it without having to worry about the headache of inspections, et cetera, listed on the MLS. But you can get potentially higher dollar amount, like get more
Yeah.
because we're gonna list on the open market.
Yeah, that's really it. And I was just having a conversation with some folks about value proposition. I think that's one of the really missing pieces right now in the market is like everything's being so commoditized, and it's kind of a brutal world out there with everybody just pinching pennies and looking at bottom dollar.
Yeah.
But people will give money up for value, and
Yeah.
value to sellers in the investing space. We as investors suddenly we all like get in this hole where we think it's about dollars. Value equals money.
Mhm.
Value often does not have to equal money for sellers. They want things like convenience. They want things like, I don't want to have to worry about the inspections. I'm an executor who lives in Seattle and I don't want to have to find a contractor and blah, 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 right? And they know they could take it to the open market and get more money, but they don't want to have to go that route. And that's really where innovations shine the most.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, a lot of investors already know this, but like you said, some people just get stuck in their own ways and how they grew up and how their own worldview. But it's like how people value time, energy, and money are just wildly different. You have some people who only value money. You have some people who only value their time. Everything's all about how can I spend as little time as possible on this thing. And some people, it's all about energy. Myself, I'm like
Hmm.
pretty energy driven. Like, what's going to give me the most energy, and how can I buy back some of my time? But yeah, for me, it's mostly about energy. I'm like, is this going to be a drain so that it compounds and causes me to, you know what I mean? And I think that's what it is for a
Yeah.
lot of sellers, is what you're talking about. It's like we can easily get focused. The investor can too easily get focused on the money and forget that for them, it's
Mhm.
about like, do I want to go through the energy of this? Or even if they're not having to do anything, even if it's not a big energy drain, what about the emotion? Kind of there's some overlap
Mhm.
there, but like, especially if it's an inherited property, like, do they want to deal with any of the emotion of looking at the paperwork of this property at all? Or can they just walk away and be done with it? So
Yeah.
yeah,
You want
emotion is
you
a
want to
huge
think about
one.
it. Here's a perspective to think about. DoorDash wouldn't exist if it was all about the dollar because they collect this stupid amount of money between you and your food, right? There's
Yeah.
like these fees, like all these other costs. But what do we pay for? Convenience. I
Yeah.
just want it. I want my McFlurry at 8 o'clock at night. I don't want to, I don't want to have to put my sandals on. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like,
And I'm going to
that.
pay
It's
more
like,
than the price of the McFlurry to get the
yeah,
McFlurry.
100%, right? So like it's so funny, but we get into our business mind and we just think it's like, because we're buying properties for under full price that it all has to be about money, and it really isn't so often. And we got to ask the right questions, I think, and that may be I'm not trying to oversell the sales aspect of it, but like that may be why we've uncovered this gap of sales process is because as we start to dig in with business owners about how they use novations, they just can't get out of their own way about like, I have to make my deals about money, right? And
Yeah.
so we end up with that situation where we're like, well, what's your sales process? And they're like, oh, well, I do an MAO, I do a calculator, I make this low ball offer or whatever, and like that's just is what it is. And that's actually a sales problem, not an exit strategy problem.
Mm.
So, we if you ask a question, one of our best questions is, uh, and I'll just give you like a tiny little bit of a role play there with it, is that, hey, in real estate, there's typically three things that we can narrow down to create a deal as we're coming up with our solution. It's either price, time, or convenience. Let me just ask you, Mr. Seller, which one of those would you say is the most critical to you? And I'll get the answer. And if you just ask them that three-part question, you'll get the answer. And if it's price, like, does anybody on this call win? Right? Like, are we out there paying top dollar? No, probably not, right? So price is
Yeah.
not necessarily where we win. If they say convenience or certainty or timeline or whatever, right? Okay, cool. That's a game I can win at.
Yeah. Okay, nice. I want to get into the role play a little bit more here in a sec. We got a question that just came in. Zach Marin says, how does the contract work? How is it structured differently than an assignment or double closing? Will this work when the end buyer needs to obtain a mortgage?
hmm So, Zach, I'm going to answer every piece of that back to back. How does the contract work? Your A to B contract should look almost exactly the same as your normal A to B, with a clause in there that allows for the ability to assign, which you probably already have, and or novate, right? So as long as you have that language in there, your initial A to B contract should be buttoned up. Novations get a little bit more technical beyond that, right? And I don't want to, take this and overcomplicate the technical side of it, but you do need to make sure that you have a novation agreement, which then is part of that you get that signed when you're getting that third deal signed, your end buyer. So that's a specific document, and that would be something that would be more technical, usually where people go wrong. And that answers your next part, which is how is it structured differently than an assignment? It's normally structured the same up until the point where the buyer comes along, and then instead of doing an assignment document, you are doing a novation document, and you're also having the original seller sign the A to C contract, which is key. They're signing that end buyer deal. And so now your sales agreement, the novation document that you get signed, is actually replacing your interest, and that's technical, but that's really what's happening there. And then this new sales agreement goes into place, which allows the new buyer to buy it basically directly from the original seller, but with one giant caveat, that this novation, you have an interest on the property that allows you to pay the difference. And that's how it does that. Which now goes to the third part of your question. So will this work when the end buyer needs to obtain a mortgage? The answer is yes. And the answer is yes because of all the things I just said. Because the sales agreement is A to C, clean deed transfer from A to C, clean agreement of sale from A to C. That's what you need in order for the financing to go through, because they don't like assigning, right? They like Fannie Freddie backed loans are typically not so friendly when it's an assignment, and novations do work. And that's actually what allows you to get more money, because you're selling it to buyers who are typically using financing. That means they want to use the home for shelter, and that's a higher value to them. So shelter is a higher value than people who want to use it as an investment.
Mm.
So
I feel like that makes sense. I'm tracking with it. So his follow-up question was two follow-up questions. So my fee is paid by the seller, like as a lien payoff. And then,
very similar. Yep,
okay. He says lender never sees A to B contract, correct? That's what he's asking.
correct. Yep,
Okay. Gotcha. Okay. So
all very
walk me.
technical.
Yes. So let's do a little role play, man. Take me back to you're with the seller and ask, I'll be the seller in this situation. Ask me that first question. What was it? What do I value?
Yeah, sure. So, hey, Brady, uh, I'm just trying to get a feel for how, like, I'm in the business of creating solutions, right? So I'm just trying to get a feel for how I can craft that solution where it's a win-win for both of us. And when we're putting our offer together, there's three major components. There's price, there's time, and convenience. And I'm curious, man. What would you say would be the most important to you?
I'd say probably time and convenience. I'm willing to spend a little bit of time on it, but I think, yeah, I'm looking for like the simplest way we can do this.
The simplest way we can do this. Great. And what would you say is absolutely a non-negotiable of those three? Price, time, and convenience. What's something that you're just like hard set on?
It's got to be convenience. I don't want to have to think about it too much. I can't afford the
Okay,
mental space right now.
I appreciate that. So, and it's time from the role play, because what I want to
Yeah.
share with you is that the way that we tee novations up is by anchor dropping, which is a whole other art and science of negotiating, based on reframing. So what we do is we drop an anchor, and so in order to make a novation deal, what we actually do is we make a cash offer first. And so typically what I'll do, or what we do as an organization, is we want to drop that anchor, and then we're going to slide into the novation conversation, right? So let's just, for funsies, we're going to say that your property currently, the way it sits, is worth about 100, and let's say that the ARV on it's maybe 200, and I will drop an anchor. I'm going to cash anchor drop you, and I want you to make sure that you're buckled up for that. All right.
Yeah.
So, Brady, here's the thing that's always difficult for me is that we've developed a lot of trust and relationship here, and I feel like we're working towards the solution. And what I'm afraid of is that I'm going to let you down. That I'm going to make an offer that's going to let you down, because the what I'm seeing here with all of the pieces of this deal is that an investor like myself would probably need to be in the $35,000 range, with a cash as is straight and easy transaction.
Hmm. Meaning you want to make 35 on it? Is that what you mean?
No, that's the offer that I'm
Oh,
that
yeah.
that I think
Okay.
would
Gotcha.
probably be, yeah, would probably be the most logical cash investor offer. What kind of feelings do you have around that?
It's a lot lower than I was thinking, a lot lower than I was hoping for. It makes me think I
Mm,
might be willing to do some of the work, but yeah.
okay. Um, is it a hard no?
Um, no, it depends on how easy the process will be, but yeah, I might be willing to list it or maybe
Okay.
make some
Okay.
repairs at that price.
Not at 35. You're just, but I need you to say
Eh,
no. I need you to say
yeah,
no to 35.
yeah, not 35.
Okay. So now what I can do is I've changed your frame of reference down, right? Its current condition is 100, ARV is 200. I just hit you at 35% of current value, and I hit you at, like, I don't even know what that percentage is, like less than 25% of its ARV, right? So I'm like really referenced down on my anchor drop. Well, now what I can do is I can slide up from there, and I can say, hey, so if that's a no, then I might be able to work with you. But if we're talking about price, time, and convenience, here's how I can make some exchanges for you. I'd be willing to get you a little bit more money than that $35,000. But what I'm looking to probably do is be able to have us work out timing and convenience, where maybe I have a little bit more time to close on the property. And if I have that time, I can probably get you a little bit more than the 35. And if you and I are able to work out something where, from a convenience perspective, I have some convenience and I take that off your shoulders, if I do that, I can probably get you more money as well. So, is that something that you think we should be talking about? And you
Yeah,
say,
for sure. Yeah.
great. And
Yeah.
and now what I've done is I've teed up the ability to have a longer closing period, more access to the property, which is what I want to be able to show it, and
Yeah.
I'll get you more money, right? So then I'll pitch you, and we call it in our organization the equity protection program. So Brady, I think your home and your situation qualify you for the equity protection program, which actually allows me to get you more of your equity in your pocket. And in exchange for that equity in your pocket, what I will do, I'm going to be looking for a third party buyer prior to us ever closing. That way I can have the advantage of time, which saves me some money and gets that money to your pocket, right? So that equity protection program, and then I would go in and I would technically describe a little bit more of the novation. But first, I want to get your buy-in, right? So I would say, Brady, if I
Yeah.
could get you, $55,000, but in exchange, I'm not closing in 12 days, I'm closing in 75 days, and I have access to this vacant estate property that we're talking about. No harm, no foul to you. No repairs would change on your side of things. I'm responsible for anything from this point, this conversation forward. As long as that works, I can get you that extra money. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. I'd hope for a little bit more, but that's more reasonable for me to not having to
Sure.
do anything with it.
Yeah, and true sales that setup. I'm going to probably take it away from you if you're telling me, I'd like a little bit more. I might say, hey, you know what? How much of the risk that you said you don't want to have? How much of the mental energy that you don't want to spend? How much
Yeah.
are you willing to invest those back in order to get that extra money? You see, so I'll take
Yeah.
away what I've just given you in order to trade that, and now you can start to see why sales became such an important part of it because it's like you know there's so many investors out there that are looking for that easy button to make more deals and make more money. And they think that novations as a transaction are the solution, and they absolutely are. But the place where they fall flat is that their sales skills are a 2 out of 10, and they need to at least be a 6 out of 10. And
Mm.
now all of a sudden, we've been having a bunch of sales conversations.
Yeah, interesting, man. Interesting. Let us know if you have any questions in the chat. That's good. I'm just trying to wrap my head around this. What are some of the more objections you get from sellers as you sort of walk them through the process? By the way, I love the phrase you coined there, the seller equity protection program.
Yeah, it's been a game changer. Eric's like really big on labeling
Mhm.
as a way of creating importance, and people love it. So the equity protection program, yeah.
We were just
Um,
talking just random side note, me and my coworker Braden were just talking about this last week with Apple, their big keynote. They didn't call it Apple AI. They called it, well, what do they call it? Apple, and they didn't call it AI. It's Apple Intelligence. Still stands for A, but
yes.
it's like, they've learned that it's important to label it and, put a moniker on it.
Yep,
Anyways,
absolutely.
interesting.
So, just a pro tip, label everything, call it a program, right? We have our leave behind program, which is code for leave your stuff in the house and we'll send a clean out crew with a trailer and a dump truck. You know what I mean? Like, so we
Yeah.
label everything here just for the record. But probably one of the most common objections that you're hearing from clients or customers is like, that they might want to list it. And that is the other aspect that comes back to what's your value prop, because
Yeah.
your value prop is that you're still going to enter into an A to B contract with them that specifies that they don't have all the liability and responsibilities that come with a traditional listing where they are the responsible seller. They are still deeded as the seller, but your agreement with them, the A to B contract, even though you're going to replace that contract specifies that they're still selling it as is, and all of the benefits that they originally had with that agreement of sale are still their benefits. And so as an investor now, you are helping them facilitate this across the finish line, and your upside is that you get the benefit of whatever that other end buyer might bring to the table. Their benefit is that they got more money than any of the other investors were going to pay them cash.
Hmm.
So
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. And they don't have to act as the seller. They don't have to, yeah, do as much work as
correct.
involved in a typical listing, which is
That's
still not
exactly
a
right.
ton, but some people, like you're saying, might not want to do any of it. Like they just want to be done.
Hmm. Hmm.
We got a question in the chat. Oscar says, Oscar Gomez, what type of qualifications process are you having with buyers, especially when a property is owner occupied? What expectations do you set as they may be interacting with the seller during a showing?
That's a great question, Oscar. And so I will share with you that one of the things that we found in our process is that it's to everybody's advantage to have the listing agent be involved and understand the process and be proactive. So our listing agents, our expectation is that they are meeting with that seller within 48 hours of the acquisitions appointment occurring. And so they set expectations with the seller that because they're getting a little bit more money from us in our agreement, that the trade-off is we're going to have some interactions with taking it to the open market. We try very hard to make it convenient for them, because oftentimes that's one of the sticking points is like, I really didn't want to have to deal with showings. Specifically when the property is owner occupied, that's one of the places where Novations is not a silver bullet, because they still have to deal with that. So you often have to figure out a way to make it a win for them. Sometimes we'll offer them like, we'll do like bundles of showings, and we'll say, hey, if you give us a 2 hour window of time on Saturday and a 2 hour window of time on Sunday for showings or an open house, I'll give you $100 gift card. You go buy, you go shopping, or you go out for movie and whatever, right? And we'll just like do some of that type of stuff, like a little bit of a trade for convenience with them. And really, that's what it comes down to. last
Mm.
but not least, your question about what type of qualification process are we doing with the end buyers? We are vetting them to the same level that every realtor should be vetting, which is we're really getting nitty gritty on mid score. Like, what's your mid score? Is it a pre approval or a pre qualification, which are not the same? Pre approval far superior to a pre qualification. We want to see that they've been underwritten to a certain extent. We want to make sure that we're not going to make the seller believe that that third party deal is good to go, and then we're going to back on that within the next 10 days or whatever. So
Nice.
so hopefully I covered all that. Yep.
Yeah, I think so. And so just to reiterate, like to the seller, the whole process is transparent. Like they're meeting with the realtor, they understand the whole process from start to finish, right?
Hmm. Yep.
I think it's some of people's rub without being an expert on novations. Like some of the people's rub that I've heard is like, oh, you're hiding something from the seller. It's not fully transparent. How can you do this ethically? But
Hmm.
you're telling the seller everything you're doing. So
Man,
no,
I can't even like I, I get that a lot. Like you're so like your sort of like prejudgment of it and like what people might talk about is exactly that. And I'm like, you should see like our appointments that we're like sitting there at the kitchen table. We're like, your property's going to be on Zillow in 4 days. How do you feel about that? Right? We are
mm,
like really being transparent. Like it's going to get sold for more. This is, but again, we're not trying to double the number of deals. We're trying to find those extra 1 to 2 that are a good fit. It's like the ones like that I just gave you that example, right? That is out of area of executor where they like, I want a little bit more money. The other investor said, whatever price, and you can beat that other price. You can be more competitive, and you're just using the market to your advantage. That's like, but transparency is big, and there's an elephant in the room, which is that you got all this legislation that's coming down the pike, and like it's coming. It just is, right? And wholesaling is literally can be illegal now in South Carolina. You can go to there's prison is on at stake, right? And transparency is better be the name of your game moving forward because there's too many eyes on it. There's too many people who have some strong feelings about investors making big profits, and we have $100,000 deal on the line this month, um, and we have it written as a novation, but we're actually going to end up doing a dual close on that because we want to we want to have the deed come through us to be able to take it to end buyer. I mean, there's some things that we're doing a little bit differently to make sure that we are being um, extremely doing the right thing all the time, right? And transparency is a big part of it. We have an investor disclosure that they sign the moment we walk in the front door, like,
mm,
hey, we're here to have an investor conversation. So there's
mm,
no bait and switch. There's no like like the whole, and if this is you, that's a you thing, but not I'm not saying to
yeah,
you,
yeah, yeah.
Brady, but
You're
like
good.
if you're like the guy that's out there that's like, hey, sign this paper, and by the way, my uncle's going to be here tomorrow, and it's not your uncle, it's three other investors that you're bringing through. Like that stuff's not going to fly here soon enough. So
Yeah.
novations allow you to do it above board. You have a licensed realtor that's involved. And we see that that's going to continue to probably be viable in most situations. I do think that some states might even make novations tough, and we'll just deal with that as it comes. But yeah.
I love that, man. Brian Driscoll, good friend of ours. You saw him in the commercial earlier for Motivated Leads. He does a pay per lead service. He put together one of the guides that we're giving away in the Summit bundle, and I love it because in one of those sections he talks about uh, just the business case for running a transparent, ethical business, like just how it makes good business
Mhm.
sense. And like for me, it's like you want to be able to sleep at night. And so I think everything you're saying is true. Like you need to be able to run it transparently. If it involves bait and switch tactics and gimmicks, then that's not something that you're going to be able to rely on or scale long term. And so,
Mhm.
yeah, I appreciate you kind of demystifying it and talking about some of the rub that people have with it because they don't fully understand it. It sounds like. A
Absolutely.
couple other questions. We got a few minutes before we wrap. Let's see. Nick Sherwin says, "Are there ways to reduce your exposure when if a property is difficult to sell on the open market?"
Yeah, and honestly, Nick's like cool name by the way, but that's a great example of it, right? Like to reduce your exposure if a property is difficult to sell in the open market. Yeah, the way to reduce that exposure is to tell the seller your property is tough to sell in the open market. Which, by the way, and I'm going to blow everybody's mind. Like we here we are, right? This big Goliath Novations organization where our investment company is 70% Novations and we own an Novations education company. Guess what happens when you offer and pitch Novations and have a conversation with the seller that says, hey, here's my concern. I can maybe get you more money and I can take this to the open market, but there's a very legitimate chance that you and I spend 75 days with me hustling on the open market and nobody wants it because I think it's a difficult sell. How would you like me to handle that at the end of the 75 days? And the seller's like, well, I don't want to wait 75 days to not sell it. And you know what happens? Your cash offer just got a whole lot more attractive. And
Yep.
having and pitching Novations actually, in a lot of cases, pushes them back where they realize that what they thought they wanted, which was more money, it's not worth the risk of more money. They don't want that experience. And then you end up saying, hey, I think we're going to have a really difficult time here. 75, 80 days. You have, right, you back up to the landfill, you have these other situations, right? Whatever it is, it's a problem. And it's like, I'm as concerned as you are that we're going to spend all this time together and no end result that really works for either of us. And that's really why I'm not willing to have skin in the game. I'm not going to give you certainty that I'm definitely taking it to the closing table. I'm going to have an open-ended due diligence or a really long due diligence so I can have it on the open market. And if it doesn't play out, I'm sorry, but we gave it our best shot. And they're like, well, no, I don't want that experience. I want you to tell me you're closing. Be like, absolutely, happy to do that. You remember what that price was that I gave you 8 minutes ago? That's the number that has certainty attached to it. At
Yep.
that price, I'll close in 4 days.
I
And
want the
now all of a
speed.
sudden,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, that's good, man. That's good. I really appreciate that. Yeah, it's funny how even if you're not going to use innovation, you can use it to push them back towards the cash offer option. Yeah, and like how you said, like it's
Sure.
not. I think it's really important to think about the context of like you're not trying to push. It's not push everyone towards innovation, but have that little niche tool in your tool belt so that you can use it when you need to close one out of every 10 deals or whatever.
I love that analogy, and I just want to point out, like, if your plumber shows up to your house and they have one tool and it's one hammer, how good do you feel that they're going to be able to solve any problem they find in your plumbing? Not that good, right? So like,
Yeah,
it's not about just walking in and just hammering whatever tool you have. And if you do decide to use Novations, it's not like a shiny object you just hammer every time. It's like being a savvy investor involves also, it's not always just having all the tools, it's knowing how to strategically and smartly use them, right?
yeah. I love that. I'm a big construction nerd, and one of my favorite things is when a contractor walks in and they're like, "Hey, check this out." Like I love hearing that. Like, "Hey, look what I can do."
Hmm.
Like here's all the
Yeah.
different options we have, and it's like, "Oh my gosh, this guy knows what he's doing." Like all these different
Yeah.
options, he really knows his stuff. He didn't just come with this hard sell on this one option for me. So,
Mhm.
big takeaway. Like we've been saying this for years, but like have multiple options. Consider going hybrid. Consider getting your license. Consider innovations. You can no longer just go in and say, this is your one thing. I mean, you can, but if you're willing to lose a bunch of deals, say, maybe I'm not a
Mhm.
fit for you and you're willing to send them to someone else, you can if all you ever want to do is wholesale. But anyways, food for thought. We got
Yeah.
about 3 minutes here. I guess if there's any other questions, people put them in the chat. I don't see any right now, any new questions. One thing I'll ask Joe is what you've been in sales for a long time. You've got your sales skills dialed in. For people that don't yet feel confident on novations, what are some of the specific tactics or concepts, like you mentioned anchoring? What are some of the specific things you would recommend that people work on so that they could feel more confident pitching novations?
So in Novation, a great question, man. And novations really are, they should be the sum product of a great sales experience where because like again, going back to your construction, or I like the doctor analogy too. Like if you
Mm.
went into a doctor's office, they asked you one question. They're like, "Do you have a headache?" You said yes, and they say, "Great. I have good news and bad news. Good news is I think I can solve it. Bad news is it's going to require surgery tomorrow." You're like, "Dude, I think I might just need an Advil." Like
Yeah.
have good bedside manner, right? Have the question. So I think the best thing from a sales perspective is a really well established sales process that allows you to earn the right to get to the end of it, do an anchor
Mm.
drop, and then have that conversation. So if I can give I have a website that we have that has a
Yeah.
simple video that anybody's welcome to visit. It's ramprei.com. Alongside the Brewer Method family, we've launched Ramp Skills and Conversion Academy, which again is sort of like the baby cousin of Novations, because we just got sick of people asking us for Novations help, and it was like, dude, your sales skills are not that good. And so really it's about curiosity based conversations that allow you to get to that point where then you can have that anchor drop and that true solutions conversation. So ramprei.com. And there's a video on that site about what we call the LAO, which is lowest acceptable offer, not max allowable offer. Blow your
Mm,
mind. Stop using max allowable offer. If you're making offers based on mathematics and logic, you're leaving a ton of money on the table. And so we teach a sales process inside of that curriculum that's based on finding out what the seller's lowest acceptable offer is and then matching your solution to that number.
interesting. I love that. I put the chat, excuse me, I put the link through the chat. Check it out, guys. Also, whoever did the graphic design on that website, that is freaking killer. Like the marketing on that website, it's
That's
so cool.
that's that's Benmont, man. We have a rock star team over here, so I appreciate that. I'll tell him you said that.
Tell them we love it. It wouldn't work for a motivated seller website, guys. That's not what you want your motivated seller website to look like.
No.
It's too fancy for that, but probably works well for what you guys are doing for education. Cool, man. Well, I
Appreciate it,
appreciate
man.
it. This has been really valuable. It's a fire hose, but it's a good fire hose. I feel like you brought a lot of clarity and a lot of transparency to the conversation. So I appreciate that, man. And it's been fun having you on the summit. Thanks for joining us, Joe.
Appreciate it. Thanks for the invite, Brady. Thanks, man.
All right. Thanks, Joe. We will see you guys later.